remember the first time I heard about the plague ship. I had a friend named Shannon who, despite the name, was a guy. Not just any guy, though. He was a nerdy, overweight, socially awkward guy who happened to be the son of a state senator. Both Shannon and I had recently graduated high school, and we wanted a trip to remember it by. He didn't really have a lot of friends besides me, so he would often throw ideas at me for a party or a trip. Seeing as I sold weed back in high school, I had plenty of friends, or at least people who would hang around and call themselves friends. How about the plague ship? Shannon asked me through a mouthful of home fries as I sat in a diner booth across from him. He ordered enough food for 3 people, including chicken steaks and turkey pot pies and bacon, and to my growing horror, he had eaten all of it in a single sitting. I had a coffee and a bagel. I sat there, wondering how he didn't throw up. The plague what? I said, raising an eyebrow. What's that? Some video game? Shannon laughed, a high-pitched, womanly sound that caused the rolls of fat on his neck to jiggle and dance. Oh, no, he said, a video game. Definitely not. This is real, man. My dad told me about it, and I did a little research. Now I was intrigued. I leaned closer across the table, feeling the wispy heat from the coffee rising towards my face. Your dad knows about it, huh? Tell me everything you know. And he did, though it wasn't much. According to rumors his father had heard, the Coast Guard, police boats, and fishermen in the area kept encountering an unknown vessel. From eyewitness accounts, it looked ancient and battered. The staves of the hull had rotten holes covered with black mold. The mold sent out tendrils that seemed to grasp and flex across the outside of the ship like clenching fingers. The sails of the boat had coarse, black stitches running in irregular square patches up and down it. A strange, white kind of leather composed the sails, which witnesses claimed looked like human skin. Dozens of skulls tied to ropes jiggled from the masthead, cracking into each other with hollow smacks like wind chimes from hell. And at the top of the masthead, like the angel on a Christmas tree, a crucified, decaying body hung, silver nails biting deeply into its wrists and ankles to secure it forever to the post. That sounds like an urban legend, I said, rolling my eyes. That's like all those legends about the Mary Celeste still roaming the seas with her ghost sailors. But that's not all, Shannon said, lowering his voice into a faux spooky, campfire tone. His magnified eyes behind his glasses looked owlish, roaming around the diner as if looking for something, and not finding it. There were deaths and disappearances. The people who saw the ship claimed that it has walking corpses, men with slit throats, and pale, waterlogged skin who abduct anyone who sees the ship. One guy apparently escaped by shooting his captor and jumping overboard. The Coast Guard vessel ended up finding him near the flaming ruins of his boat a few hours later. He said they killed everyone else in horrible ways, skinning them, crucifying them, keel-hauling them, everything. He said they burned his wife alive on the ship. What does keel-hauling mean? I asked. He shook his head. You really don't want to know. It's like the sailors' version of skinning, I guess, using sharp barnacles on the side of the ship. They strip the person naked, and then drag the person's back up and down over the edges of the shells, and like hundreds of little razor blades, they just scrape into the flesh. He shuddered. I don't know who thinks up these punishments. I thought about his idea of going out to find this mysterious ghost ship. I had no doubt in my mind that the entire story was probably a load of BS, but it would be fun to get out on the ocean. Okay, let's do it, I said, grinning. We should get a few people together and go out and find this cursed ship. I'm sure it will be a trip worth remembering. We had asked around in our circle of friends and found a few who knew about boats and sailing. Travis, a friend of mine who towered over the rest of us and who constantly smelled like weed, told me his dad had been in the Navy and had taught him all sorts of useless crap about boating. He even told us his dad had a boat in the ocean port not too far from where all the activity with the supposed ghost ship had been spotted, and that he would let him use it if we filled it with gas, and gave his father a few $100 for wear and tear. Seeing as most boat rental agencies charged anywhere from $200 to $700 an hour around my area, I was instantly on board with the idea, paying much less. And that's how I found myself on a white, sparkling cabin cruiser with Shannon, Travis, and 2 other friends who volunteered to come on the trip, a pair of identical twin girls I knew named Leslie and Sadie. The name of the boat shone on the side in bright silver letters, the Sea Lady. A couple weeks after Shannon had first proposed the idea, we set off a couple hours before sunset, deciding to do some night boating. and see the endless expanse of the Atlantic under the dark summer sky. And if we came across the ghost ship, so much the better, but I wasn't holding my breath. We set off from the port, the exclamations of multiple excited voices reverberating over the open water. The cabin cruiser was slightly crowded with 5 people, but it wasn't too bad. I had brought a couple of ounces of magic mushrooms, and quite a bit of cannabis edibles, and flour. Some of the others had brought their own stuff, mostly booze. I decided to wait to pass out the mushrooms. If we were all tripping, it might get hard to boat, and I didn't want to end up stranded in the ocean waiting to come down. I went around and gave some of the weed gummies out to everyone, though, and people pulled out beer and started drinking. Someone gave me a bottle of Spaten. "This is going to be so awesome," Shannon said, his huge eyes gleaming with excitement behind his glasses. His irises looked red, his eyes half closed. I could tell he didn't usually eat edibles. Someone had turned on the radio, and Led Zeppelin echoed across the endless ocean. The sun had started to set, red streaks setting out across the sky. "You know," Travis said, coming up to us, "there's an old sailor's legend that red streaks at sunset are good luck. Red streaks at sunrise are bad luck. Apparently, scientists found out that it's true. A bloody sunrise sometimes means a storm is coming, and with most winds going in a westerly direction." "Yeah, I don't really care," I said. A shark's fin broke the water nearby, circling the boat. It snapped at something under the dark surface, and a cloud of bright red blood rose up, expanding like smoke through the shadowy water. I didn't know we had sharks around here. Leslie and Sadie had joined us. They were both thin with eyes, so pale blue they looked almost colorless. Dirty blonde hair ran down their backs. They were not, thankfully, dressed identically, because I would have found that somewhat creepy. Leslie had some expensive designer clothing, while Sadie wore a shirt for some heavy metal band called Samuel. I ended up passing out some mushrooms to everyone soon after. Shannon said he didn't want any, but everyone else ate a handful. I chewed the dried, fibrous stalks with an expression of disgust, choking it down with a bottle of Coke. "There are sharks everywhere," Travis said, staring out at the fin splicing the water as it receded into the distance. "They're nature's alpha predators. They almost never get cancer, and they can keep regrowing their teeth. When they lose them, their teeth actually face inwards, like barbs that grab the prey and keep it from escaping or thrashing around too much." Shannon piloted the boat, driving like an old lady across the open expanse of ocean. I saw the last red rays of the sun disappearing over the horizon, like drops of blood washed away in the rain. "It's empty out here," Sadie said, taking a sip from her beer, as she looked up at the night sky, "and you can see all the stars. There are no clouds. They're all so bright out here. Is it normal to not see any other boats?" I asked Travis. He shrugged. "I guess. I don't usually come out at nighttime, though. My dad took me fishing at night a few times when I was a kid, and I still remember seeing Coast Guard and police boats occasionally, though," Travis said. As I stared at him, I realized his face appeared to be changing colors, growing orange and red hues. I looked around, confused. On the horizon, I saw a boat on fire. Long fingers of flame reached upwards towards the sky, sending out billowing black columns of choking smoke. The sky became covered with an expanding dark cloud that blotted out the stars and the moon. "Jesus Christ," Leslie shouted, breaking my trance. "What if there's people on there?" "Then they're probably dead," Travis said blankly, seemingly entranced by the flickering, dancing fire on the seemingly infinite expanse of shadowy water. "But maybe people jumped out before it spread. Maybe they're just over there, treading water and waiting for help. We need to go check it out." Shannon had stopped the boat and got up clumsily from the seat, tripping and falling over a coiled rope. I helped him up. "Can't we call the Coast Guard for help?" Sadie asked. Travis jumped up and ran towards the driver's seat. He twisted some dials until he grunted with satisfaction, then depressed the speaker's button and began shouting into it. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the Sea Lady. Our position is..." He looked down at an electronic compass and rattled off a list of coordinates. "May have spotted a burning ship nearby. We don't know if there are any survivors. Please send rescue as soon as possible." He repeated the message a couple times, but I heard no response. A chill ran down my spine. As I waited in the silence, only the static hissing of the speaker and the rhythmic splashing of the waves breaking it. I thought I might have heard garbled fragments of random words in the white noise, but it might have been my imagination, or perhaps an effect of the psilocybin. Travis started to pilot the ship over towards the burning wreckage, driving much faster than Shannon had. The waves raced past us, topped with white foamy caps. The salty air seemed to revive me, but I also noticed the first rising vibes of the mushrooms starting to take over. I felt anxious, my chest tight. I didn't want to potentially see burnt and blackened bodies right now. The stars seemed to dance in circling patterns of colorful light. I saw Mars overhead, looking down on us like a bleeding eye. Venus seemed to have spikes of white light spiraling around its bright center. Travis rapidly decelerated, throwing me forwards. I realized I had gotten lost in a trance for a little bit. I looked around nervously, seeing that we were almost at the burning craft. The fire seemed to have died down somewhat, though more black smoke than before obscured our view. It hovered over the water and blotted out the sky like some great cosmic dragon. As it rose high above us, hanging off the side of the deck, I saw the burnt body of a person. Whether male or female, I could no longer tell. It didn't look like much more than charcoal at this point, the blackened arms still reaching over the rails, as if asking for help. Travis continued to repeat his message on the radio. I couldn't tell if the transmission was getting through or not, but I was not hopeful. Only garbled fragments of words came through every few minutes, and we couldn't tell who it was or what they were saying. It might have just been picking up random signals from different sources for all we knew. We had no idea if help was on the way. "Oh my God," Leslie said, putting her hand over her mouth as she noticed the body laying over the railing. The ship looked like a fishing vessel, significantly longer than our cabin cruiser. It still had a net trailing behind its shattered, burning carcass. "I'm going to circle it slowly," Travis yelled from his seat at the controls. "Look for anyone swimming or treading water in the area. Look for any signs of life jackets or anything, if there are survivors." But he never got to finish the thought. From a distance, I heard water splashing as something large spliced through the rippling waves. I saw a huge, black silhouette moving in our direction. Rotten boards and an impaled body posed as a figurehead broke through the clouds of black smoke. The haze parted, and in that moment, I saw a ship that looked straight out of a nightmare. The keel rose out of the water like a black scab. The sails caught the wind, and it was exactly as Shannon had told me. Dark, ugly stitches ran across the massive sails, which looked to be made of a strange kind of white leather the exact hue of human skin. Hundreds of human skulls hung from chains, and ropes attached to the mastheads, smashing against each other with dull cracking sounds. I saw strips of rotting flesh still attached to some writhing tendrils of something dark brown and alive wrapped around the hull, flexing and relaxing like enormous muscles. I saw many holes eaten into the keel and the hull, but the strange fungus, or whatever it was, covered them in horizontal strips. A sickening figurehead stuck out the front of the ship. I saw a rotting female body impaled through the stomach with a sharp metal spear. The bloody point emerged from her mouth, her blue lips frozen in an eternal scream. The decomposing flesh hung off in strips, waving in the breeze like some grotesque flag. Her eyes stared blankly, still open. Cloudy death cataracts covered them, giving them a faded look. Human silhouettes gazed over the sides of the craft at us. I looked up and met the white, glistening eyes of one as it stared blankly down. I immediately wished I hadn't. It had white, mirrored eyes like a raccoon caught in the headlights of a car. I saw colorless gray skin hanging loose off the bones. Some of them had deep slash marks on their throats or faces, while others had holes blown in their stomachs and chests. They all had weapons in their hands and stood as still as statues, grinning down at us as the ship sped towards the Sea Lady. "Get us away, Travis," Sadie screamed, running over to where Travis sat in the cockpit, sweating heavily despite the fierce ocean wind. Travis' one diamond earring sparkled and glistened as he furiously pushed the boat towards its upper limit. Shannon walked over to my side, staring up at me with huge eyes. His fat, soft body quivered with terror. "I can't believe it's real," Shannon whispered. The plague ship drew nearer, moving in a blur through the smoke. The engine whined and shrieked as Travis pushed the Sea Lady to its upper limit. But as I looked back, the ship seemed to loom larger, and I thought of the shark's fin we had seen racing across the ocean towards some smaller fish. Now we were the fish, and I knew without a doubt that the shark had found us. The ship smashed into the Sea Lady with a shrieking of tearing metal. It felt like an earthquake under my feet. I got thrown violently across the deck, smashing my face into the railing. I saw a violent explosion of colors in my vision, purples and blacks and dark reds flowing down and dripping in kaleidoscopic tunnels. The mushrooms had fully kicked in. A rising sense of total panic shook my soul. Travis was standing next to me, blood dripping from his nose. He hauled me up to my feet He started screaming something in my ear, but all I could hear was hundreds of gallons of water rushing into the boat. And behind that, the ticking of the engine, like some massive mechanical heart undergoing cardiac arrest. Finally, the engine died with a loud groan. The plague ship had turned and begun to circle back to where our boat stood in the water, as stranded as a shipwrecked sailor. Travis furiously tried to get the engine started again, but I heard noises like flooding and random sputters and hiccups from the boat. "Oh my God, we're going to die here, aren't we?" Leslie asked, crying into her hands. Sadie rolled her eyes. "Screw that," she said, going over to Travis. "What do we have for weapons here?" I admired her chutzpah and bravery. Compared to her sister, she seemed like some mythical Valkyrie. Leslie continued to whimper into her hands. Both of them had eaten a sizable dose of magic mushrooms, probably at least 4 grams. Sadie's pupils were the size of quarters, as Travis reached into a compartment and pulled out some fishing gear. After moving aside some lines and boxes of tackle, he found a couple filleting knives. Their blades gleamed, sharp and wicked in the dim starlight. "Here," Travis said, handing one to Sadie. Shannon waddled over, his shorts tight around his chubby legs. After hesitating a moment, Travis gave a knife to Shannon. "What am I supposed to use?" I asked. Travis grinned and pulled out a flare gun. I looked at it, confused. What the hell am I supposed to do with this? This isn't the movies. I'm not even sure a flare gun can hurt someone. "This is a pretty heavy flare, man," Travis said. A heavy rope came whipping down between us, making me jump. I looked up and saw the plague ship moving slowly overhead. More ropes were thrown down, and within seconds, the first of the damned vessel's shock troopers slid down. The first creature down was a man who towered over all of us, even Travis, who was well over 6 feet tall. My friends stood around with huge pupils and staring eyes. Leslie refused to look at the loose, gray skin on the abomination's face. She continued to whimper and moan like a kicked dog. I could smell sulfur, rust, and salt water oozing from the creature's mouth, along with undertones of sickly, decaying flesh. As the 5 grams of mushrooms I had eaten continued to hit me in waves, I could see the colors of the rotten odors emanating from the abomination. Blasts of cancerous black mixed with the dark red of clotted blood in my vision, forming an aura around the creature that sizzled and popped. His body looked waterlogged and swollen, purple, and black veins bulged against his soft, wet flesh. He raised a hand that reminded me of a dead, desiccated starfish. His fingers curled. I saw the nails had turned black and cracked. They used dark pus that dripped down the creature's hands in searching rivulets. "Where is the tribute?" the creature hissed in a drowning, gurgling voice. Salt water and blood bubbled from his cyanotic lips. I could hear my heart in my ears, slamming repeatedly against the cage of bones that held it, as if trying to escape from the death it knew was so near. I held the flare gun in my right hand. I now looked down at it, frowning. It looked like a useless heap of junk in my hand. More of the abominations landed on the sea lady, surrounding us. The creature who had spoken grinned at us, his face seemingly frozen into a lunatic death mask. "The tribute," the creature continued to demand. I shook my head. Travis and Sadie stood by my sides. "We don't know what you're talking about," Sadie screamed. "Just leave us alone." The creature who had spoken shook his head like a disappointed father, the rictus grin still plastered across his nightmarish face. Without another word, he raised his hand. I noticed a smell like a match being struck. The creature's hand erupted into flame. Still smiling at me, it knelt down and touched the sea lady. Fire jumped from its hand onto the boat, as if it were pumping napalm out of its fingers. Scorching lines of the rising inferno ate into the wood of the boat within seconds. I heard screaming, as if from very far away. Then I realized it was my own voice screaming. The creatures from the ship had surrounded us. With a shriek of mortal terror and bloodlust, Sadie ran forwards. At the last second, her long sleeve pulled itself up on her arm. I saw the wicked blade of the filleting knife grasp tightly in her clenched fist. She slammed the blade into the monster, who continued to pump out fire from his inhuman body. It pierced through his faded cataract eye and into his skull. He froze, the smile evaporating from his face like mist under the summer sun. Sadie continued to stare forwards in horror. She realized the extent of her mistake immediately. The creature plucked the knife out of its face. The entire sickly, clouded eye came with it, dripping small, black worms and squirming larvae onto the sea lady. Then it wrapped its arms around Sadie and lit her on fire. She spun with the monster as if in a dance of death, the smoke and ashes from their burning bodies mixing and rising up towards the smoke-clouded sky. Others had started to take the rest of us. I saw one dragging a shell-shocked Leslie towards the rope. She had stopped crying and now stared blankly ahead. I felt cold hands grip my back. The skin felt loose and soggy on the bones, like worms drowned after a rainstorm. I spun, raising the flare gun and firing point blank into whatever abomination attacked me. A man with a giant exit wound in the front of his chest stood there. I could see the decaying black heart beating through the wound. Tiny worms and squirming maggots ate the rough patches of torn flesh around the circumference. The flare shot into his grinning, open mouth. I saw his head lit up like a jack-o'-lantern. As his skull exploded, he fell limply to the side, the long tongues of flame licking his nearly headless body now. Without a moment of hesitation, I pushed through the opening I had created and jumped overboard. Fire blackened my clothes, and I felt an intense heat against my skin. Within seconds, though, the cooling water of the ocean had taken over. Without looking back, I began to swim away, hiding around the keel and moving to the other side to confuse any potential pursuers. But no undead sailors jumped into the water. I saw the Sea Lady sink. As the plague ship started off with its new load of cargo, I caught the last glimpse of my friends. They had taken Leslie and keel-hauled her. I saw her eyes go wide as the ropes bit deeply into her ankles and wrists. She screamed in agony as flesh peeled like warm butter from her back when the undead sailors ran her up and down over the barnacles. It turned the water a bright red underneath. Another sailor pulled off the rotting figurehead from the front of the plague ship. Even though the impaled woman had clearly been dead for a long time, when they began to lift her body off the sharp stake, her lips twitched and her eyes fluttered. Her hand clenched into a fist. The burnt figure of Sadie looked down over the side of the ship, dripping blood and yellowish pus into the salty water far below. She couldn't have been alive, yet she stood there. And as the ship pulled off, I thought I saw her destroyed, blackened hand waving to me. I treaded water and continued to swim around the remnants of the Sea Lady, not knowing what I would do. The mushrooms continued to make me wonder whether this was all really happening, or whether maybe I would wake up in some sensory deprivation tank somewhere, saying, "Damn, that was an intense trip." But I could tell it was very real when the first fins of the sharks broke the surface of the water, circling me. They must have smelled the blood from the torture and murder of my friends. Perhaps when Leslie's blood filled the water, it had drawn them from far away. But regardless, they were here now, and they were very hungry. I clung to a piece of debris from the Sea Lady. The last remnants of its collapsing frame were quickly disappearing, sending opaque clouds of suffocating smoke all over the water. A shark's fin came within feet of me. I tried kicking at it, but it just circled. And then I heard the roaring of an engine. A spotlight broke through the shadows. I looked up quickly, seeing a Coast Guard vessel. I started screaming at the top of my lungs. One of the men heard me. The ship drew nearer, but more sharks had started to circle. One came in a straight line at me, shrieking. I tried to punch and kick at it, but with a cold, burning pain, I felt its teeth sink deeply into my leg. By that point, the Coast Guard had reached me. The engines had sent some of the sharks away, yet the one on my foot had me tightly in its grip. It shook its head like a dog with a toy. I felt bones splinter and saw a cloud of blood fill the water. My foot went numb. I tried to move it, but I couldn't. A shot rang out. I saw a bullet smash into the body of the shark. It released my mutilated leg, swimming off, leaving a cloud of blood in its wake. The Coast Guard men pulled me up. As I got over the edge of the railing, I looked down and realized my right foot was totally gone. Nietzsche once said, "I am the last man. Nobody talks to me as myself, and my voice comes to me like that of a dying person." I think all those who have seen far enough have felt the same desolation, the sense of echoes fading into the darkness of the mind, the crushing feeling of the serpent eating its own tail. But on the plague ship, it was different. The cycle no longer revolved behind the veil. For those who are eternally trapped there, death has no hold.